Human rights violations continue to be a major concern across Asia, with enforced disappearances being one of the most egregious forms of oppression. Pakistan, a country filled with rich culture and identities, enforced disappearances continues on increased alarming rates. Religious and ethnic minorities, but also journalists, activists, and political dissidents often fall victim to this practice. Sadly, enforced disappearances have become a systematic tool of suppression, leaving families in despair and fostering a climate of fear and impunity.
It has been 3 years, 3 long years. She has not been found yet. I hope she is alive, and I hope she...
Unmute.
Bonsoir, madame. Soyez les bienvenus, mesdames et messieurs. Je suis Stephen Lodono de l'ONG United for Human Rights. Je voudrais vous souhaiter la bienvenue dans cette séance et je vais donner la parole à madame Charlotte pour vous accompagner tout le long de l'événement. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming in at this rather late hour. Just one thing before we start, a few rules of housekeeping. We do have a photographer over here in the room, and he's the only one who's authorized to take pictures, so please refrain from taking any pictures or videos. If you do want to obtain some material, feel free to approach us afterwards. Thank you. Then, without further ado, I think we can start. So, dear Excellencies, dear colleagues, on behalf of United for Human Rights and Global Human Rights Defense, I would like to welcome you all today here and online to this crucial side event about enforced disappearances in Pakistan. My name is Charlotte. I'm a human rights officer at Global Human Rights Defense, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before I turn to our esteemed expert speakers, I would like to say a few words about the phenomenon of enforced disappearances in Pakistan and their impact, especially on minority communities in the country. Just last week at GHRD, we have published a report on the widespread use of enforced disappearances in Pakistan and on the grave impact that these have on minority communities in particular. What we and what also many of our partner organizations have found is that enforced disappearances are used systematically to target ethnic and religious minorities in the country, especially where they are perceived to be politically distanced. Enforced disappearances are defined in the UN Convention on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances as the arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by state agents or individuals acting with the state's authorization, support, or acquiescence, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or the concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the disappeared person, placing them outside the protection of the law. So, enforced disappearances occur when individuals are taken into custody by state authorities or groups acting on their behalf, and the state refuses to acknowledge their detention or provide information about their fate. These individuals often vanish without a trace, with families left searching for answers for months or even years. In Pakistan, enforced disappearances have been reported across various regions, with a significant number of cases linked to counterterrorism operations, political conflicts, and ethnic or religious persecution. Our report first looked at causes and motivations behind enforced disappearances. There are multiple reasons why enforced disappearances continue to occur in Pakistan. One of the primary motivations here is the suppression of political dissent, and many individuals who criticize government policies, advocate for minority rights, or expose corruption become targets. Additionally, counterterrorism efforts have led to the detention of individuals suspected of extremist affiliations. This has resulted in the unlawful detention of many innocent individuals, and law enforcement agencies often operate with impunity, bypassing judicial oversight and due process. Moreover, certain ethnic groups, particularly in Balochistan, Sindhis, and Pashtun, have reported a disproportionately high number of missing persons. Their movements are often falsely classified as extremist movements in order to facilitate and legitimize disappearances of persons belonging to these ethnic groups. It goes without saying that this constitutes a grave human rights violation. Internationally, Pakistan is obliged under various treaties, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, to protect individuals from arbitrary detention and uphold their right to a fair trial. However, Pakistan has not ratified the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, which would legally bind the country to criminalize this act. And this lack of commitment on the side of Pakistan allows impunity to thrive within the country. Domestically, efforts have fallen short of delivering justice. The legal system remains slow, and there is an evident lack of political will to hold perpetrators accountable. Our report also looked at the impact on victims and their families. The consequences of enforced disappearances extend far beyond the individuals who are taken. Families are left in a limbo, not knowing whether the loved ones are dead or alive. And this uncertainty leads to immense psychological distress, economic hardships, and social stigma. But I'm sure that Mrs. Waxmuth will be able to tell us a lot more about the psychological and health impact of enforced disappearances, so I'm not going to delve into that. Many families spend years searching for their missing relatives, often facing intimidation and threats from authorities when they seek answers. Mothers, fathers, and siblings of the disappeared continue to protest, yet their voices are largely ignored. The trauma of these disappearances affects entire communities, creating a climate of fear and helplessness. The response from the Pakistani government and judiciary to these continuous human rights abuses has been largely insufficient. Many cases therefore remain unresolved, and despite public outcry and media coverage, the perpetrators continue to operate with impunity. Something very concerning that our report finds is that in Pakistan, enforced disappearances are repeatedly used to target ethnic and religious minorities. This particularly affects Baloch, Sindhis, Hindus, Christians, and members of the Ahmadiyya community. As an example, in Balochistan, just in the month of February, there have been at least 134 confirmed cases of enforced disappearances, and the year of 2024 has seen a total of 619 cases alone. Minorities continue to be targeted through enforced disappearances due to their perceived political resistance and opposition, their activism for their communities, as well as for the exploitation of their lands and resources. This constitutes a grave violation of their rights under international law, particularly their right to self-determination, their freedom of religion, and other cultural rights. Based on this report, we have formulated 5 key recommendations to address this human rights crisis, the first being the necessity for legal reforms within Pakistan to criminalize enforced disappearances. The second is independent investigations in all cases of enforced disappearances in the country. The third is ensuring judicial accountability, both domestically and internationally. Fourth is the support for victims' families. And fifth is civil society and media involvement, because we know that greater engagement from human rights organizations such as the UN and also from the media is essential to keeping this issue in public discourse. And public pressure can play a crucial role in pushing for change. Having said all of this, it is now time to turn to our esteemed panelists, who will be able to give us many more insights into this. And the first is, to my left, Ms. Isabel Waxmuth. She's our first expert today. She is a scientist and project manager at the WHO for the Universal Health Coverage and Life Course Division, and she's part of an international interactive network promoting and implementing knowledge management and collaborative solutions in both high and low income countries. She is dedicated to promoting collaborative and collective intelligence, health, and SDGs, and she has worked on Pakistan before. We are very honored to have you here today, so please, Mrs. Waxmuth, you have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you so much, really, for this invitation and this opportunity for me to speak about what can be the solution, in fact, specifically for the point you have mentioned about the support for victims' families and how, from the health perspective, we can maybe address, trauma, I would say, and not just from one generation, but multi-generational aspect. We know, for example, from the science, we have an effect, of conflict, and specifically for the victims, you will stay generation after generation in terms of even epigenetics, for example. But I will focus attention to solution and not to the problem. And to give you as well some suggestion or idea, because I have been able to implement, I am as well artist, I am painter, and how we can combine science and art as well, and how that can be useful for other important cause, or challenge we face, specifically on forced disappearance. It is the topic of today. And I will show you how we have considered, in fact, art to address this issue over the world, and specifically how art-based intervention can be relevant, in fact, for this issue of forced disappearance. To start, I will just give you an overview of what can be used, in fact, in art, and as well what is the current impact in terms of key figure we have, can be taken into consideration. Enforced disappearance have profound and lasting effect on victims and their families, resulting in severe psychological trauma and health issues. Addressing this impact requires a multifaceted approach that includes psychological support, but as well community-based strategies. And as you have mentioned very well, and I will not enter in this side, it is the legal support you have very well articulated. For that, I will focus, in fact, my attention to the psychosocial programs we can consider, like art-based intervention. Specifically, I will give you the example of Living Museum. Why it is interesting? Because today we have 40 living museums in the world, and they are able to support any people with severe mental health condition, from the burnout, severe burnout, depression, to more difficult one, like the link with the psychiatric hospital, for example, when it is very severe. But I will describe to you as well why it is interesting, this perspective and the impact. For the psychosocial programs, like creative art therapy programs, that can be considered and used to improve subsequently the health and the psychological impact of enforced disappearance on victims and their relatives. We have evidence, for example, from a lot of evidence from music therapy. I will not go in details because we have no time, but just to give you some quick overview, to improve communication skills. It is used to improve communication skills, emotional expression, social interaction, and reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression. It is very used, more and more used in hospital setting, and as well through a community health center as well. We have, in terms of impact, it is until 40-60% for improvement in social interaction and communication. It's very important to consider the effect of music. The other art, it is the creative writing therapy, reduce, in fact, symptoms of post-trauma syndrome by up to 50%. And it was one big study have been produced in the US about that. And we have effect on to increase the self-esteem, 30%. You mentioned self-determination is part of that. because without self-esteem, you cannot have your own self-determination. And as well, an increase of 40% in emotional regulation skills. And that it was, this figure has been done by a very interesting program in South Africa, by the Art School program. But you have many examples over the world. They are using culture and art, in fact, to really address this type of issue, human rights issue over the world. The third, it is about the dance movement therapy to foster body awareness and can be healing for those with trauma. And it's 45% improvement of self-perception and 30 to 50% in reduction of anxiety. And the last, it was the use in many contexts of the drama and theater therapy to explore emotion and process trauma. It encourages role playing and as well to use storytelling, allowing participants to express themselves in a safe environment. And in terms of results, we have 60% of improvement in social engagement for participants in theater, for example, of the oppressed. It is one of initiatives and demonstrate very good results. The use of art making helps to process trauma and develop mechanisms through expression and community. It is an invitation to tap into their authentic vulnerabilities and share stories not normally told by using, in this case, pen and paper, paintbrush, guitars, songwriting, and movement. It is an opportunity to speak the unspeakable through an art form, which becomes a vehicle to help explore and recover from trauma, helping them to feel grace and compassion for themselves and each other. It expands their emotional vocabularies and builds their resilience. And remembering what it means to be human and vulnerable. It's really a very interesting intervention to support specifically the victims and their family. And just one citation about that, about one participant in this art-based therapy. When I am given space to unmask and show all sides of who I am creative and engaged. I think more deeply and clearly. When I feel safe and supported, I can be whole. That is just to express. For the living museum I have mentioned, that can be considered because it's effective social prescription for mental health and trauma recovery. It offers immersive experience that allow participants to engage with art and culture. And the particularity of that, it is the capacity to offer a safe place for vulnerable population and recreate a unique context for self-learning, self-discovery, self-acceptance, and mutual interaction to feel the sense of belonging. That it is really what I want to share with you. And to finish, I will just give you some example of living museum in the world used in the case of human rights. You have the Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Santiago, Chile. The Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C., for example, the Disappearances exhibition by forensic architecture, very interesting one because he used architectural and artistic methods to investigate and document unforced disappearance worldwide. It engaged with communities to understand and represent their experience, elevating voice, often silence. And you have plenty of other ones. I will not go through the list, but and I will finish to the fact for Pakistan. What is very interesting, it is the fact you have one initiative called the Missing Person Project in Pakistan, and they have been able to involve artists, activists, and family of the disappeared, and they use, in fact, art exhibition to give them the artwork that depicts the emotional and psychological effect of enforced disappearance on family and communities. But it's just full of opportunity to as well address this issue from health and art perspective related to what you have mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. These were some very great insights into how we can address this issue. Now I will turn to our next speaker, who just so happens to be from Balochistan, like you just mentioned, and that is Jamal Baloch. Jamal is a human rights activist from Balochistan, and he serves as the media coordinator for PAUK, the human rights arm of the Baloch National Movement. And he's also himself been a victim of Pakistani atrocities, and we are very happy to have you here today and share our story. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for letting me represent one of the least heard human tragedy across the globe, the issue of Balochistan. As other panelists have also mentioned that the enforced disappearances issue in Balochistan, I have also been one of the victims of enforced disappearances. Today, I feel privileged of being here, sitting here, and being allowed to talk about what is being done wrong in my land compared to other activists that are currently in Balochistan, and most of them are behind the bars or forcibly disappeared by the Pakistani forces. Enforced disappearances is a collective punishment. It's not just one individual that was forcibly disappeared and it's just his story, but it's the story of an entire family that goes through an ordeal, an unbearable ordeal. In recent days, following the decades-long oppression in Balochistan, extrajudicial killings in Balochistan, forcible disappearance in Balochistan, Pakistani military buried 13 dead bodies and then brought dozens of dead bodies in hospitals. I saw an image where a mother was sitting and waiting in front of a hospital to find out whether one of those dead bodies is of her son or not. Imagine the pain that mother is going through. In this building, when we sit here and discuss and give a definition to genocide, what genocide truly is, I'm sure, and I can challenge this, that we can never convince a mother that this is not a genocide where her two sons were killed and she's waiting to see whether the other dead body is of her third son. She will always think that this is a genocide. And the world has been ignoring the genocide, systematic genocide that is taking place in Balochistan. There are thousands of people right now, at this moment when we are sitting here, Balochistan is on the streets. Everyone is protesting because the leadership of one of the strongest organization in Balochistan, which is called Baloch GHRD Committee, BYC, is behind the bars. Imagine a woman, Maharang Baloch, who is nominated for Nobel Prize, is behind the bars right now just for voicing for the oppressed people. And now we can imagine that if a woman who is nominated for Nobel Prize and internationally recognized can easily be arrested without any crime that she committed just because she was politically active, she was voicing for the oppressed people. And we can imagine that how hard is it for a common person in Balochistan to say what is happening there. A family who has lost a loved one, how hard is it for them to voice for that person? Simply, when Pakistani forces forcibly disappear people, they don't allow their family to protest for them. They don't allow their loved ones to protest for them, which we have to be concerned about, because the issue in Balochistan is not just about there. It's if we allow impunity in one place, then we allow it across the world. So it is very important for us, as we were discussing it earlier. I think it is very important for us, first of all, to make it our own issue, a part of our own life. Imagine we are all human beings, we are all part of this world. We have emotions, we have feelings, we have loved ones. We know someone who is very dear to us. And imagine a mother. We cannot deny, no one of us can deny the love of a mother for a child. And imagine a mother going every day to look at a dead body and try to figure out if it's her son or not. That is a very unbearable pain that we have seen, I have seen personally in my life, and that will never allow me to rest and will keep us motivated to fight for justice, fight for equality, fight for the fundamental rights of the people. In my closing remarks, I want to leave a note for the people here and the United Nations as well, that with your silence that allows impunity in Balochistan, do not push us to a corner where we fail to convince people that there is a peaceful way to resolve the issue of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Those were some very, very powerful words, and I think they will be well received. Our next panelist is Amara Baloch. She will be joining us online. Amara is a UK lawyer and advocate, and she has been speaking on issues such as women's rights, freedom of expression, and the plight of marginalized community for a number of years, also in her functions as a representative of UK women. Okay.
Hi, Charlotte, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you for having me today. Sorry I can't be in person. My focus today is on the atrocities by women in Pakistan. The situation in this region represents a profound violation of human rights for millions of women enduring violence and oppression, especially in the form of forced conversions, forced marriages, and gender discrimination. While forced conversion marriages remain of these human rights violations, they are part of a broader, deeply enriched pattern of discrimination and violence that's women. These violations are a tragic reality and sin, particularly for religious minorities, and the world must unite in its efforts to protect these vulnerable individuals from further harm. The most immediate shocking of these violations are forced conversions and forced marriages. These heinous acts affect Hindu women and girls, particularly in rural Sindh. In 2024 alone, over 1,200 cases of forced conversions were documented across Pakistan, with nearly 850 of these cases occurring in Sindh. These young girls, some as young as 14, are abducted from their homes and converted to Islam, married to men often much older than them. These women and girls are denied basic human dignity and rights and trapped in marriages against their will. These actions are a clear violation of international human rights law, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which protects women's rights to freely choose their religion and spouse. Sindhi women face a broader range of challenges that deeply affect their lives also. These issues are rooted in cultural, economic, and social norms that limit their opportunities. Gender-based violence, including domestic violence and honour killings, remain widespread in Sindh. Women face violence in the home and community, yet the lack of legal protection and weak enforcement of existing laws prevent many from escaping abusive situations. In 2004, there were numerous reported cases of women being killed or attacked in the name of honour, with perpetrators rarely facing justice. Another grave issue is limited access to education. In rural Sindh, many girls are deprived of education due to cultural and economic factors. Women are often expected to remain at home to carry out domestic duties or marry young, leading to high rates of uneducation. In fact, over 2 million girls in Sindh are out of school, and many rural areas lack basic educational infrastructure for girls. Another issue is child and early marriage. Despite laws prohibiting child marriage, early marriages remain prevalent, particularly in rural communities. These marriages put young girls at risk of early pregnancy and maternal death. Approximately 21% of girls in Pakistan are married before the age of 18, with a disproportionate number of these girls, of these marriages occurring in Sindh. Honour-based violence and social control is another issue women in Sindh face. They are often subjected to honour-based violence, including forced confinement, beatings, and even murder, for perceived violations of cultural or societal norms. Women's autonomy is severely restricted, and any behaviour that challenges traditional gender roles can result in brutal punishment. The international community must unite to address these deeply enriched issues facing Sindhi girls. The government of Pakistan, alongside civil society and international organisations, must take immediate and comprehensive action to ensure legal protections, enforce laws that protect women from forced conversions and marriages, and hold perpetrators accountable. Law enforcement and judicial bodies must be trained to handle cases of gender-based violence, forced marriages, and other abuses seriously and impartially. There must be an improvement to access of education. We must invest in education for girls, particularly in the rural areas, to break the cycle of poverty and oppression, provide safe and supportive environments for girls to attend school, and ensure that they are not married off at a young age. We must raise awareness and support survivors, engage religious community and political leaders in raising awareness about the rights of women and girls, and provide support for survivors of violence and forced marriage, offering them legal, psychological, and social assistance to rebuild their lives. Sindhi women are enduring an unimaginable hardship, yet their resilience is unwavering. From the girls abducted and forcibly converted to those battling violence and inequality, they deserve to live with dignity, safety, and freedom. We as a global community must take action to ensure that their rights are protected and upheld. Let us not allow these women's stories to be forgotten as statistics. Let us commit to a world where no woman or girl is subject to violence, discrimination, or exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amara. I think it is always important to keep in mind also the gender aspect of these things, such as enforced disappearances. So it's very good to hear from you. Having now heard from the people, from the Baloch people, from the Sindh people, we are moving to our third speaker on minorities, which is Anwar Mahmood. He is a political scientist who has served as a public relations officer at the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Switzerland. He's also the external affairs representative, of the NGO International Association of Ahmadi Architects and Engineers, and he's a dedicated politician and human rights activist, consistently advocating for social justice. So please, Anwar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm very glad that I have a bit of time today to speak on this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you all. I stand before you today to shed light on one of the most profound yet silent human rights crises in Asia. A crisis that has largely escaped the scrutiny it was desperately deserved. This crisis is a systematic persecution of religious minorities in Pakistan, most notably the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. While the international community has rightfully focused on other human rights violations in the region, the plight of the Ahmadis remains hidden in the shadows of both local and global indifference. Today, I bring their suffering into light in the hopes that we as a global body will not turn away. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community, once thriving in Pakistan from the first foreign minister, like well-known academic personalities, and many faces discriminations. They have faced the discrimination at every level of society. They are marginalized, persecuted, and denied their basic human rights, like voting right. What set this Muslim community apart from the other minorities in their persecution is not just societal. Let us talk about Ordinance, just I will give you a brief, Ordinance 20, that we mostly the victims, our Ahmadis, members of the victim of this Ordinance 20 in Pakistan. That says, this is the legally binding tool that criminalize any attempt by the Ahmadis to publicly practice their faith. Under its provisions, Ahmadis are forbidden from calling themselves Muslim or reciting the Islamic prayers or verses, or even from using basic Islamic terminology like Salah. If we call ourselves these, then we will be sent into the prison. This law is not merely a form of cultural or religious suppression. It is a direct attack on the fundamental freedoms of an entire group of people. Ahmadis are subject to arrest and imprisonment for practice that any other Muslim or religious group can freely engage in. Criminal sanctions are applied for the simple act of identifying as a Muslim. So, it is not just a law that leaves Ahmadi vulnerable, it is a power of state that shields those who attack them. I call them state-backed groups, so-called. These laws create an environment for fear where acts of violence and discriminations go unchecked, often leading to impunity for the perpetrators. Beyond the violences, Ahmadiyya Muslim community suffers from the systematic stripping of their social and cultural rights. Ahmadis are often excluded from basic public services and education. They are barred from participating in elections, like I said before, voting right, denied the ability to vote, and excluded from the public offices. These are, and I'm coming on one report which I have received recently this morning. These incidents happened yesterday on the Eid Fest. Ahmadis in Pakistan have faced immense difficulties in offering Eid prayers in multiple locations on 31st of March 2025. It's yesterday. Ahmadis were forcibly prevented from performing their Eid prayers in various areas of Punjab and Sindh. The police did not allow Ahmadis to offer their prayers. For example, in Lahore, this is the second biggest city in Pakistan, in Lahore, Ahmadis were stopped from gathering for Eid prayers at 5 different locations, and including the central worship place of Ahmadiyya community. Extremist elements belonging to the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan gathered outside Ahmadi places where the Ahmadis were worshipping. They had hate slogans and inciting violence. Ahmadis were also barred from the offering Eid prayers in many other places. In continued assaults on the right to worship, authorities in Karachi, this is the biggest city, as you know, have sealed 2 more Ahmadiyya places of worship. So even the police came and they sealed our worship places. Intensifying the campaign of persecution against the already marginalized community. The first place of the worship located in Azizabad also. And the second in the North Karachi. There are the different addresses which is here. So now, in recent months, there has been a troubling rise in violence and hate activities against the Ahmadiyya community in Pakistan, and incidents of desecrations of Ahmadi graves, targeted attacks on their places of worship, and open incitements of violence through public speeches and social media. They have increased alarmingly. Extremist groups continue to spread anti-Ahmadiyya propaganda, further fueling intolerance and discrimination. The lack of accountability of perpetrators has emboldened such acts, creating an atmosphere for fear and insecurity for the community. In year 2025, so far, extremists has approximately 169 Ahmadiyya graves demolished and 8 Ahmadiyya places worship also. Currently, there are 42 Ahmadis who are behind the bars in various jails of Pakistan for the reason of faith. These registrations is criminal cases, and denial of the bail results in wrongful and depriving individuals of their fundamental rights to liberty and due process. Ahmadis in Pakistan have long been subjected to systematic discriminations, with their right to worship increasingly under threat. In recent times, this persecution has escalated with alarming frequency. The hardline elements continue to pressure authorities to crack down on the community. The sealing of their places of worship is not just an attack on their religious freedom, but also a blatant violation of fundamental human rights. Repeated targeting of Ahmadiyya places of worship underscores the increasing intolerance of Ahmadi who are facing across the Pakistan. Beyond legal restrictions, the community also contends with social boycott, threats, and violence. The state failure to protect Ahmadis' rights only emboldens who seeks to erase their presence from the public sphere. Such actions are in direct violations of Pakistan's constitutional guarantees of religious freedom, as well as international human rights standards. Following is some of the images which you are seeing on the screen, which are taken yesterday, which happened. Now, call to action. I'm coming to the last call to action. First, the international community must press Pakistan to end the state-sponsored persecution of Ahmadis, particularly by repealing Ordinance 20 and removing discriminatory laws. We must call on Pakistan to respect its obligations under international human rights law, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees the right to freedom of thought and the religion. Second, we must offer support to Ahmadiyya community in their fight for equality and dignity. This support must extend beyond the words of condemnations. It must include concrete actions that will protect them from violence and ensure that their voices are heard. Finally, the global community must provide adequate protection for Ahmadi refugees. These individuals forced to flee violence and persecution must be recognized as vulnerable and provided with protections they need to rebuild their lives. Conclusion: the silence surrounding the persecution of Ahmadis in Pakistan must end. This world cannot continue to ignore their suffering, and we cannot allow them to remain invisible any longer. The time is here for actions. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Anwar, thank you for these very impactful words. And with that, we have concluded all of our panelists. So I would like to thank you all for coming today and for sharing their insights. I would now open the floor to questions or comments that you have. So if there's anything that you would like to say, feel free to raise your hand and maybe introduce yourself shortly and say what you are saying. Okay, I don't see any questions so far. That's not bad. Maybe our panelists would like to comment on something that the other panelists have said. If there's anything else that you would like to mention now that we've heard anything, also feel free to share.
Maybe I can ask a question to Isabel, that how, do you have any idea that we can highlight such issues through your exhibitions?
Yes, absolutely, because that it is a vehicle. For example, I have done important art exhibition in the UN on the violence against women. And we have been able, in fact, to co-create with different artists over the world. That is very powerful because it is to demonstrate as well from the artist, voice. It is we are all human beings, as it was said, and we, in general, we engage, for this exhibition with a call for artists, and the artists will have a specific topic to illustrate with their artwork, and we collect, their suggestion, and after we are able to design, in fact, the full story, to illustrate the issue, and the idea it is always to be solution oriented, not just to show the issue, but okay, over the world, how we can as well showcase positive, stories. And I love art for that because it is, we have many examples of people, even myself, I have lost my husband, for example, how you recover, in fact, from such a tragedy, with your own transformation. In general, when you are, for example, you look around of you, you have many people, they have experienced this terrible, tragedy in different ways. For example, I am thinking in Africa when some hospitals have no enough doctor, or they have no health insurance, so the people cannot have treatment, or wait, or in the waiting list, and they die. I have seen some very young girl, for example, for 13, 14 years old, with terrible, metastasis of cancer, because you cannot have any treatment. Imagine, I know it's another issue, but so many non-consideration, as you say, for dignity and how we can collectively, provide collective solution, and we have. And I think definitively we can consider an art exhibition to showcase this issue, And I think it will be fantastic if, as well, some other minorities, to showcase other minorities of the world, go through the same issue, What are the common factors as well, Why we are still in this situation, why it is like that. And maybe as well identify some positive stories, or some cases of, people have been able to go through some resilient process, and can translate his voice in art format. Why art? Because art is universal language, can be understood by everyone, and it is both in the religion, cultural aspect. But it is this common language we can really use, and for me, art speaks for itself. But you cannot, you see it, and from the issue, and as well how the people can find as well amazing courage, to face this type of trauma, and that is really my hope for humanity. I have been through that myself. I know it is possible, and I think we have the obligation for me to as well inspire people, for the best and not the worst. And for the people are still not with this level of consciousness or awareness, of tolerance, how we embrace, not division or separation, but unity. How we can use as well other strategies, to impact because these people, they are human, how we can impact their emotion, their feeling, to change as well their views and their perspective. Because sometimes when you have an issue and it's very contextualized, the people, they have very, very short view of the perspective. They are stuck in this perspective. How we use some innovative tools, to just change first the perspective of these people, and to connect with them with the inside, not just outside, but the inside. And I think art is really relevant for that, and I will be very glad to discuss that with you and to see what we can present together for you and exhibition of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I see there is a question in the room, so I'm just going to give the mic over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. I'm Yatsin from the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, which is based in Banjul. You have highlighted 5 recommendations, and Ms. Isabel also mentioned the art-based approach and with advocacy message delivered by Anwar and Jamal and Ms. Baloch also. However, they are missing something, how to implement these recommendations. This is a challenge here, because we know that there are huge human rights violation, missing of protection of human rights and promotion of human rights in the mentioned territory. However, still, this is not amplified. The voice of Jamal and all the speakers are not amplified enough in order to take concrete actions, in order to make these recommendations implemented on the ground. So what is missing? How we can combine the public pressure, the diplomatic pressure, and other mechanisms in order to at least bring a tangible change for the improvement of the human rights situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that is an excellent question. I will, if any of you would like to, okay, Jamal, thank you.
As a victim, this is a question within ourselves, and it creates a conflict with what we are doing here when we are not being heard. Simply, I was discussing what was happening in Balochistan. People were arrested, and it was after decades, the United Nations gave a statement that this is wrong. They also are giving recommendations to Pakistan that this should not be done, but that's not the solution, because on the other hand, Pakistan is trying to justify what it is doing in Balochistan, and it happens with other also oppressors around the world. So the basic thing that I have come to a conclusion about it is like organizations or countries or politicians across the world are always depends on the common interests. What is their interest in resolving an issue? Why should they resolve my issue? Why should they resolve my problem? This is always a question for authorized people. So my conclusion, I have always thought about it, is to bring all the voices together to put pressure on them. Bring all the organizations together to put pressure on them, to build a chain of people, a chain of oppressed people that can put an adequate pressure that this is not acceptable. If one person is being subjugated, if one person is being oppressed, it is a threat to another person, because we cannot allow impunity. We cannot allow these organizations even United Nations that has given us UDHR. For me as an oppressed person, this is just a piece of paper until it is not implemented, and it will be implemented, as I believe, through the unification of oppressed people who are suffering and who know that what is the weight of oppression. Yes. Thank you.
That was a great answer. Thank you very much. Do any of the other panelists want to add something onto this, or I think this was a good. Do you want to? Okay.
No, just to add on your, I fully agree with you. And I also fully agree with you. The implementation is the problem. Our all circle comes on that point, the implementations. We take part in all mechanisms, all platforms, channels. But the question arises, why? Even our problem, we are talking since many years, but still it has increased the violation against our peaceful community. My question is the implementation. There are laws, but they are not used. Now, I call to international community, all international organizations, institutions, they must, not should, must put pressure on, for example, Pakistan, for the implementations. So that's what I can say. Even though I spoke last week with some European parliamentarians, then I said that a lot of funding goes to Pakistan. Why you don't put some points in it? Listen, we need peace. And where this funding is going, make that country accountable. So this is also one solution.
Thank you. That, I think, sums it up very nicely. If there are no other questions from the room or comments from one of our panelists, I think we can conclude on this great note. Thank you to all of our panelists again for coming. Thank you to all of you and all of the people online for joining today at this late hour. I would also like to thank United for Human Rights and Global Human Rights Defense for organizing this event and for bringing it together. And we hope to see you all again very soon. And with this, I think I can close the session.
Human rights violations continue to be a major concern across Asia, with enforced disappearances being one of the most egregious forms of oppression. Pakistan, a country filled with rich culture and identities, enforced disappearances continues on increased alarming rates. Religious and ethnic minorities, but also journalists, activists, and political dissidents often fall victim to this practice. Sadly, enforced disappearances have become a systematic tool of suppression, leaving families in despair and fostering a climate of fear and impunity.
It has been 3 years, 3 long years. She has not been found yet. I hope she is alive, and I hope she comes back to her mother and father. As a father, I would not hope that this kind of things will happen to anybody. So I request to the international community and then Pakistan officials to put a lot of efforts not just for the media, but the true efforts to bring this little girl home.
So, once again, Pakistan did not close their eyes. They have witnessed an alarming rise in enforced disappearances, particularly targeting religious minorities such as Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, and Ahmadiyya Muslims, Baloch, Pashtun, and Sindhi activists, along with human rights defenders and journalists, have also been forcibly disappeared, often without any formal charges or legal recourse. The forced disappearance of individuals violates fundamental human rights, including the right to life, security, and justice. The targeting of minorities in Pakistan exacerbates their already vulnerable status, making them more susceptible to violence, forced conversions, and systemic discrimination. Addressing this issue is not just a national concern, but a global imperative, as human rights violations anywhere set a dangerous precedent for international human rights norms. Global Human Rights Defense and United for Human Rights are hosting a side event during the Human Rights Council session to address the alarming situation in Pakistan and its failure to act on enforced disappearances. The event will feature speakers from intergovernmental organizations, including World Health Organization and UN Women, alongside victims of enforced disappearances, who will share their insights and experiences on the issue. Pakistan, the world is watching you. What will you do?